and welcome everyone to A Seat at the Table. I am your host, Christina Steed, and today we are going to have a conversation about philanthropy, foundation work, being invested in our communities, and what diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging looks like when you're doing that hard work on the ground. So with that, I have joining me today, Chanda Smith Baker. Chanda has over 20 years of experience working in and for and with underestimated communities. She is currently serving as the Senior Vice President and Chief Impact Officer at the Minneapolis Foundation. Chanda, I can't wait to talk to you to hear your perspective on all that has been going on. So first of all, can you tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing at the Minneapolis Foundation?
Yeah, I'm really excited to have been in the role here for almost 5 years. I came here because I wanted to further my impact by amplifying the leadership and the work of others, which is effectively what we do by bringing together donors, right? We help manage, in short, charitable checkbooks for folks and families, and then put those investments to work either through their direct investing or through grant making, which I lead. I also host a podcast, Conversations with Chanda. I lead our advocacy and our research strategies. And so all of that comes to bear and comes together on behalf of community to address sort of our hardest challenges, to look at where we have disparities, and to begin to make a sustainable difference in the communities that we care about, the Brown and Black community, and communities that have been left out and left behind in some instances.
Great, thank you for that. So the foundation recently awarded $4.2 million in racial and economic justice grants earlier this year. Can you talk about some of the organizations and how they're impacting the communities? I know there were a lot. There was a whole long list on the press release, but some that maybe stand out in your mind in terms of how they're impacting the community?
Yeah, I can. And just to provide like scope, right? The Minneapolis Foundation puts out about $130 million a year into community to make a difference. This is one grant opportunity in which we are looking at how do we build wealth, how do we create more of an economic infrastructure within some of the communities that have been underinvested in or that were impacted by the unrest that happened in 2020. Man, there are so many organizations that are doing narrative change and organizing work. I think about our intermediaries like Neon or LISC, that we are able to put money into those organizations so that they then can work with Brown and Black entrepreneurs that are in the startup phase, helping them to get the right type of capital, strategy, and connections to be able to make a remarkable difference in the community. We also have had groups like Ampers or Pollen that work on narrative change work, which is how do we get out the story of what's happening in terms of, I don't know, the budget with policing and what's happening in the city, so that when community is interested in acting upon, moving towards justice, that they're doing that with having the facts that they have and the base that they need to know how to move forward. So those are a couple of examples.
Wow, those are dynamic examples, really great examples. I wanted to ask you, so you're a fellow Midwestern girl. You grew up and you rep for your Minneapolis. Yes, I'm from Chicago. Tell me about your passion for your community. Like, do you remember, or was it just being and growing up in that community that made you like, I want to have an impact and this is the road that I want to go down to do this work?
Yeah, so, I lost my mother in 2020, and certainly there's been a lot of contributors, but I want to start with her because she was my day one. And my mother would often say to me, a community is where you invest in, not move from. And she said that both literally and figuratively, like if you do move out of the neighborhood, you don't move away from the people, right? And so that was always something that was hardcore to her. And I grew up in North Minneapolis, which is sort of identified as the Black community, the community that's the home of the most disparities. For me, it's been the home of the most like loving people, like, some of the most creative people that I know have come from this neighborhood. And growing up, I often say like there's biases of people, but there's also stereotypes of neighborhoods and how people define a neighborhood as though it's bad and everyone needs to be disrupted because it's horrible. And so my life work has been threading the multiple layers of narrative and realities that exist in place. And how do you amplify and elevate that so that communities are not just described by their problems, but by their assets? That investment in dreams and goals of a community are just as important as tackling the issues that exist there. And without both of them, you can create quite a hopeless situation. And so I've just been driven by that. You know, my family's been very embedded in this community for 5 generations. I still live in the neighborhood, and I'm committed to making a difference here.
I love that. And so on the topic of family, you had a recent podcast episode where you interviewed your son, Malik Rucker. And I want you to tell us how that came to be and how you passed down that passion for giving back to the Minneapolis community to your son.
Yeah, so the conversation with my son was quite funny because it was actually, I'm always seeking who should I be talking to. His name kept coming up. And so someone on the team at the Minneapolis Foundation was like, hey, you should talk to someone at B3 Sports. There's a guy there, Malik Rucker. Do you know him? Right? They didn't even know it was my son. And I'm like, I actually, in fact, do know him. And yeah, okay, I will talk to him because it kept coming up, which I think is very special and sort of indicative of the role that he is playing and leading in this community. With my kids, and I spent some of my time single with them before remarrying after a divorce, they had to roll with me. So it's sort of my mom's intentionality and her parents before that was committed to the neighborhood and doing work and investing and being visible in that work. So there was a piece of that, but it was also a piece of like, I gotta go to this meeting. Y'all coming with me.
Right. Come on through.
Come on, like I got class to go to, you got to come with me. And so they've been able to see the work through their eyes as young people because of where I brought them, and always sort of raising them to understand that life does not evolve around you, but you are brought here for the purpose of how you impact this community in this world. And he is really just embodying it right now. And I'm really quite proud of him.
Wow, what a legacy. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So a question around just kind of circling back to the efforts and the work that you do in the area of philanthropy. You've been called a disruptor in the field of philanthropy. What does that mean, Chanda? What does being a disruptor mean?
If I could put a badge right here, I'd have a badge on, right? Like, to me, it is such an honor to not be defined as someone who is thinking within a group that is interested in maintaining the status quo, that is willing to put new ideas on the table and run with them. And I have done that throughout my career. Like, you know, I'm willing to go there and I'm willing to say it. I'm willing to say it on behalf of my community. I'm willing to say it because of the influence that I now have in these roles. And sort of cutting down to the chase. So I appreciate it. And especially when it comes from the folks in community that know that I'm going to go to the table and I'm going to bring their ideas, their needs to the table, regardless of where the table's at. Right. I'm going to do my very best to rep my community, as you said in the beginning, and the needs that exist here.
Yeah. So that is in keeping with our theme, right? A seat at the table. Talk to me about how you bring others, whether it's community partners, whether it's young people, so they also have a voice and can pull up a seat as well to do this work.
Yeah, you know, I really appreciate that question. And what I will say to you is, you know, you talked a little bit about my work in the beginning, but I really believe a theme has always been, and what I'm quite committed to is, you know, I think my role is to create the conditions for others' success, right? And I believe that in my house, I need my kids to be successful because I've helped raise them to be successful. I need the people that report to me to be successful, because if they're not, that's on me, right? I hold that responsibility very close to my heart, that I'm here to help you achieve your best self. And I have a number of people that have worked for me that I've hired that were younger or emerging in the work. that are leading fully now. And I'm very proud of that. Adair Mosley, I hired him when I became CEO at Pillsbury United Communities. He was my executive assistant. I was in that role for 7 years, and he followed me as CEO. So he went from my executive assistant to CEO.
Wow.
And he's remarkable. And there's other people under my leadership that are leading in very big ways in the community. And I've committed in all of the roles to hire people, 30 or under. I've hired a couple of people at the foundation in their early 20s, straight out of college. And I've stayed committed to them and raising their voices up. In my granting strategy, last year, we had 79 community people, folks across the diversity of place and space and age and perspectives that help guide our granting strategies or where we work granting. One of those funds in particular is a fund for safe communities, which is advised by young emerging leaders, largely under 30, that make those recommendations to me. And then I typically go with their recommendations.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about philanthropy as a career that maybe a lot of people don't think about, particularly people of color. And you, in your background, you serve on boards, like I think you're in the Joyce Foundation board,
Yeah.
And I just wonder how many people you see in leadership roles who look like you, who have that ability to do grant making, and how impactful that is, right? Because it is a part of the work of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging to be able to support these organizations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've always, I had a family that gave back to community, and often in community, we don't call it, like, I'm not a philanthropist, right? I'm helping out my neighbor. I'm doing this work, right? And leading an organization or running programs in an organization, I was raising dollars and then being able to round out my career. But I can tell you that one thing that I've stayed committed to is leading outside of the organization I'm in, which brings me added perspective and network and opportunity to learn and grow in my personally, and then how I implement my work. And I've chosen to do that in governance. I sit on 3 foundation boards right now. And my ability to do that work is just compounded because of that. And I would recommend it, that when you think about the work that you're doing, you also, I would advise, need to think about other areas for you to continue to learn and grow. And for me, governance is that. In these roles, it is getting more diverse. It is a difficult place. It can be very challenging to navigate, but it also can be quite rewarding in terms of being able to see a portfolio of grants become more diverse or more focused on policy that will make a remarkable difference in the communities that you care about. Mm-hmm. It is a different thing swimming in privilege and wealth, and talking to people that have the magic bullet, on what's going to change, or have opinions about people or place. And so I get a great deal of satisfaction out of the art of that, right? Seeing someone who started here and moves here, seeing a portfolio that wasn't inclusive to one that is inclusive, seeing a community that didn't know what the Minneapolis Foundation was to one that sees it as a community foundation that belongs to them. And to be able to do that is something that is satisfying beyond words. And I would encourage anyone that if you have an interest in philanthropy, reach out and talk to folks that are in philanthropy that and just talk to them about the possibilities of getting into it.
That's great. And I think I would love to unpack, kind of go a level deeper to understand your path to philanthropy. Like, was it going up a corporate ladder, or was it kind of like many people's careers, a jungle gym where it was, kind of you're going different, trying different things, doing different things? So can you share some of your path?
Yeah, I sort of have an interesting yet sort of boring story, perhaps. I mean, it was life that was doing all this. I started out at Pillsbury United Communities. I had 3 kids. I was divorcing. I did not have a degree. I went there. It was a role that required a degree. And I remember being really bold in the moment, right? Which wasn't like sort of my MO at the time, but like, you need someone to do the job, or you need someone with a degree. Like, if you need someone to do the job, call me.
Wow.
And it came out of, I had to feed these kids.
Yeah, right.
right? That'll make you get a level of boldness that you don't know that you have. And so I was able to be in that organization in multiple roles, ending as president and CEO 10 years after that, right? And then serving
Wow.
in that role for 7 years. And I had an interest in philanthropy, but I came through that route of working in a program, leading a building, to leading an organization. And then the CEO of the Minneapolis Foundation reached out to see if I had an interest in perhaps joining the team. And I thought, what a way to sort of round out my perspectives from being in community and often attending programs to running an organization to now funding organizations, that just widen sort of my worldview in the way that I approach issues.
Wow, that's great. What are some of your recent success stories? I mean, we talked about the grant making and the distribution of support for organizations, but what are some recent success stories that you love to kind of talk about?
Oh my gosh. There's two that are quite personal. So in like playing off of the conversation before, as I went through the search process, getting to the foundation and became clear that I was going to be a finalist, I said, look, there's two issues that are near and dear to me that I have to be able to lead on if I come to the foundation. One is on gun violence reduction or communities being safer. The other one is on criminal justice reform. This was in 2017, right? And so we all know what happened in Minneapolis in 2020.
Right.
We know even before that, Philando Castile, we know after that, Dante Wright and Amir Locke, like this is something that has been really important to me for a long time. And establishing this fund for safe communities in 2018, and we did it with $20,000.
Wow.
And we've been able to raise and get money out the door of several $1 million, but we've raised almost $6 million into that fund, being able to move the foundation to squarely working on issues around reforming the criminal legal system, working on gun safety. And that is something that I'm immensely proud of, because it didn't come from the foundation putting its own dollars and saying, Chanda, go do it. Right. It started with $20,000 and us being able to get many people across this community and companies to invest in that fund to allow us to be able to continue to work on improving wellness, safety for our community, both from community level violence and systems level violence in the form of policing.
Wow. Wow, that is major. That is major. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, what are some challenges that you've been working through as we get to a point where, I mean, let's just be honest, some people are experiencing fatigue as it relates to these issues and voicing that. And but we know those of us who have been committed to this work year after year after year, it is work that needs to be done. It is not easy. So I would love to hear some of the challenges that you're working through.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with fatigue, right? I'm coming off of a 3-week break, and I've been back for 2 weeks, and I'm getting ready to take another one for another 10 days, because I recognize that it took us a long time to get here. And in order for me to be at the top of my game, I need to have rest. I need to step away. I need to have perspective, and that leading through exhaustion and frustration will never produce your best work. And so I am really focused on modeling what it means to take a break and doing it. So I think that's first. We are in a level of urgency in the community where people want change right now. And I'm not a believer in the quick fix, right? And jumping in to what's right now. So holding the tension between people that wanted to move right now and understanding how systems move and what they need for that change to be smart, to not have unintended consequences, is a hard place to be. And the opinions of the folks that I care a lot about, right, that are really at the high, or from my community, right? I work for a foundation that was founded in 1915.
Wow.
Right? There's a whole lot that's happened between then and now,
right?
And whether or not they see themselves in this institution or not. And so when the community comes for institutions, I have learned not to take it personally, and that I need to stay squarely on my game, no matter how critical or supportive community is, and they've largely been supportive. But that's hard. It is hard to hold it. It's hard not to respond to the urgency, the frustration, and the pain of community,
Right.
matched with a solution that stops the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't
Yeah.
have a solution to stop the pain, but I want to so bad, and I hold that in my body.
Yes.
And that's hard.
Yes, yes. And you sit at this unique intersection of being a part of the community, having grown up there, knowing these things on a personal basis, but also understanding how to navigate systems, understanding the world of philanthropy and how to do systematic change, and that it doesn't happen overnight. So to that point, what do you do to practice self-care?
Oh, man. So yeah, vacation. Taking time off. What the pandemic did for me was for me to really hone in on friendships and relationships, because there was a moment where we're like, are we going to see anybody again? Are we going to get outside of our home? And so for me, we formed a little bubble, right? And it moved from, Zoom happy hours to outside happy hours, to really practices of being together in the middle of a lot of pandemics that were occurring. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I've come out a little bit more balanced. What does it look like when personal and professional are blended? What does it look like when work is at home and in the office and in community? What does it look like when your friends also work in the field? Like, there's all kinds of nuances and merging of things that haven't been merged in this way. Mm-hmm. So my lines around care have to be more explicit.
Yes.
Right. So when am I traveling by myself, with my husband, with my family, with my girls? Like, I have a plan for that. Mm-hmm. When am I taking quiet time so I can hone in on strategy versus when am I working with my team? Right. Like the deliberate planning that you would do for anything that you're trying to execute and to sustain. I am now doing that with me. Mm-hmm. And what does it mean for me to sustain in this work and to continue to grow and be better? It means I have to have a plan. And part of that plan is having in place time to rest, to think, and to build relationships.
Mm-hmm. No, that's important. Definitely. What is the role of mentorship in your work, whether it's you mentoring others or you having been poured into by previous mentors?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's critical to anyone's success, right? Either formally or informally. I have a group of people, if they call and they need me, I respond. I don't care how busy I am, because I know I needed that, and I still need it in the work as I'm navigating. One thing that I know about successful people, and as I navigate in philanthropy, is people that are wealthy, people that are coming from the broader community, they ask for help. They ask for favors. They ask for help. There's something about how we show up that we feel like we have to show people, and we don't want to look weak and we don't want to look vulnerable.
Right.
And, part of my thing is, like, I lead from the most transparent, authentic way that I can, mm-hmm. which means I don't have all the answers.
Right.
Right. It means I'm confronting issues. And so for me to go and say, hey, this is something I'm dealing with. And actually, right before this, I was on a call with one of those people saying, hey, I'm navigating this. This is how I handle it. Do you think I should have, is there anything else I should be considering? Mm-hmm. Like, I just need to do a gut check. Right. And then there's other people that are new in roles, and I know that they've worked for me before. And I'm like, hey, I know you're in this role. Would you like to go grab coffee? Because I would love to be part of your support team, because I still am committed to your success. Mm-hmm. And I will do that informally. I'm way better informally than can we meet every Tuesday, but yeah.
Right. However it gets done, it gets done.
Yeah.
So my last question is, how can our viewers support your work?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. One, go listen to the podcast Conversations with Chanda. I would love for you to follow it, to give feedback, and to suggest other guests that we should have on that podcast. The podcast is really aimed to bring people more proximate to the issues that our communities are facing, and to expand how they see them, how they make investments, how they vote, how they engage. So that's one way. The Fund for Safe Communities that I mentioned, that's my heart. And I think it's where our neighbors need us to be, in increasing safety. And the one thing I don't want to get any more proximate to is gun violence.
Right.
And it is pervasive, and we need to get on top of it. And I don't want to go through another unjustified police shooting. So that's a fund that folks can get to. And then I think just in general, just more globally, getting engaged and giving back to community in whatever level you can makes a difference. Right. And I think the more we show up, the more people will see us, the more they respond to us, the more they see the collective power. So give where you can on these issues. And I think it just helps us. We're all interconnected. It just helps all of us.
Right. Well, with that, we will wrap up A Seat at the Table. Chanda Smith Baker, thank you so much for sharing your work, your passion, your road to success, and what you all are doing at the Minneapolis Foundation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you.
All right.